Hello classy people, this is Josh the Top Hat Gamer, and this week I'm reviewing The Last Guardian. Initial development began on The Last Guardian almost a decade ago, and since then it was plagued by various delays that left many wondering if it would ever see the light of day. Now that it's finally out, it's time to see if the wait was worth it. The Last Guardian puts you in control of an unnamed boy who finds himself stranded in a mysterious fortress alongside a gigantic, feathered, griffin-like creature named Trico. Trico and the boy must work together to escape this ruined landscape, all while discovering how it is they ended up here in the first place. The plot seems fairly basic for the most part, but as the circumstances surrounding your awakening in this place come to light, The Last Guardian displays much more depth, and kept me guessing as to what the meaning behind the game's events would turn out to be. Easily the highlight of the game's narrative is the growing relationship between the boy and Trico, as the beast is initially hostile, but eventually warms to the boy and helps him progress. More than anything else, The Last Guardian excels at delivering moments that get you invested in the bond between the two, as the game tugs hard on the heartstrings, and I did find myself tearing up just a little bit at some of the game's most poignant events. These memorable moments are brought to life by the game's soothing visual style that makes every environment and scene feel like a watercolor painting in motion. These brilliant visuals are brought together thanks in large part to some really stunning lighting effects. Trico's design is perfect too, and its big puppy dog eyes and ears that constantly flop about make it instantly lovable, like the family pet. It's also easily the most technically impressive aspect of the game's visuals, as the constant ruffling of its feathers looks gorgeous. It's kind of a shame then that the boy looks so out of place with an art style unique to him and other humans in cutscenes. I'm not sure what exactly to call it, but the solid colour of his design sticks out in an undesirable way. Putting that aside, The Last Guardian's welcoming visual design combines nicely with the ambient sounds of nature that stand in for the soundtrack in most situations, and creates a calming atmosphere throughout the majority of the game. The more action-focused moments are accompanied by brass and percussion-heavy orchestral movements, creating a nice contrast between the game's different sequences. I only wish that during these more exciting moments the frame rate wouldn't suffer so badly. Aside from Trico, there isn't a whole lot going on that should put that much strain on the game, and yet, frame rate drops are far from rare. Even if the game did run perfectly, its core gameplay runs into a number of issues that left me feeling disappointed at worst and frustrated at best. The core mechanics of the game involve platforming and puzzle solving to move forward, and this means platforming with the boy and Trico together or progressing forward to clear a path for Trico. The puzzle solving is usually a little more than going to a place and pulling a lever. In sections where you're tasked with moving the boy forward, platforming is a little bit slow and the hit detection on certain ledges is absolutely abysmal. It also doesn't help that the camera often has a mind of its own, and certain platforming maneuvers won't work unless you have the camera just right, but the game's clunky controls are just the tip of the iceberg. When the game decides that you need to use Trico to help you platform, whether by leaping over chasms or using him to climb over obstacles, the gameplay descends into a frustrating mess of bad AI and the aforementioned so-so platforming. Trying to get Trico to do anything is an absolute nightmare, even though you're given commands that should make interacting with the beast easy. Want Trico to move somewhere? Don't bother using the ineffective move commands, just walk over to the place you want him to go and call it. Want it to jump a gap with you on its back? You better hope that Trico doesn't just decide to immediately jump back for the hell of it. Even when it listens, it does things so slowly. Some people will argue that Trico's disobedience all plays into the idea that the game is testing your patience for a stubborn yet lovable pet, but all it got me was a frustration that almost caused me to give up on trying to finish the game. There's a single moment in the game that requires Trico to dive under some water with you on its back to get through a tunnel, and I honestly contemplated ejecting the disc, snapping it in two, and taking the week off from reviewing. I was stuck on it for a whole hour. This one obstacle that I knew how to pass, that the game wouldn't allow me to. To make matters worse, when I let go of Trico's back for just a moment, it dove into the water and went through the tunnel, proving to me that it could be done, but that the game, for no reason at all, just didn't want me to progress. Beyond the frustrating AI and mediocre platforming, there are combat-like scenarios in which Trico tries to protect you from magical guardians that try to grab you and steal you away. These sections are fairly inoffensive, as escape and capture isn't too difficult, but they're rarely exciting, as all you can do is wait for Trico to bat these mystical suits of armor around until they're all dead. You're able to jump on the back of guards or pull their helmets off to distract or kill them respectively, but why would you bother? Trico has it under control. Even when the game gives you what is essentially a projectile weapon, there's very little use for it, beyond clearing paths to allow for more platforming, or killing enemies that are just out of reach. And that's really all there is to the game. Platforming that's equal parts bland and infuriating, and poor AI that only diminished my adoration of Trico. There are a couple of memorable sequences, but they're few and far between, and are mostly memorable because the rest of the game just doesn't do a whole lot. And despite the game's simplicity, The Last Guardian is constantly flashing controls up on screen, which breaks immersion pretty thoroughly, and adds to the frustration when you're in the last part of the game and it's still trying to tell you how to jump. In terms of content, the game is relatively long, but I feel like you'd be able to clear it in under 6 hours if the AI would listen to you the first goddamn time you ask it to do something. There are collectible barrels to feed Trico and even extra costumes for the boy, but the game offered very little to tempt me back for more. I really did want to like The Last Guardian a lot, but it's hard to deny that its clunky controls, unresponsive AI, and overall bland gameplay bring the complete package down a lot, despite the charming story and mostly awe-inspiring presentation. For a game that took almost a decade to come out, it feels somehow rushed, and unfortunately the most memorable aspect of the game at the end of the day is the frustration it caused me. The Last Guardian gets the top @gamer rating of bad. A touching story and an appealing overall presentation isn't enough to save The Last Guardian from its outdated, aggravating gameplay. There are glimmers of something great underneath all of the issues I've had with this game, but I have trouble recommending it to anyone. If you're really into the games from Team Ico, then you might get something out of The Last Guardian, but if that's not you, then don't even bother. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the review informative. If you missed the last review on Pokemon Sun and Moon, click the annotation. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go and drink heavily.